The world as I knew it dissolved in an instant. 1 second, I was in the midst of a normal day, and the next, everything was chaos. The crash came without warning. There was no time to brace, no time to prepare. My mind registered the impact, the violence of the collision, but everything else happened in a blur. Time seemed to stretch and contract all at once. I remember feeling weightless, detached from my body, as if I were floating, no longer tethered to the earthly world. There was no pain. In fact, there was a sense of strange calm in the chaos. I was aware of my body, but I no longer felt it. I could see it, broken and lifeless in the seat, yet it felt distant. It was as though my soul had been pulled away, freed from the constraints of flesh. In that moment of separation, I experienced a profound stillness. The world around me seemed to fall away entirely. The chaos of the crash, the rush of passing thoughts, all faded into the background. I was suspended in nothingness, yet it wasn't a void. There was a presence here. A presence so powerful, so filled with love and serenity, that I couldn't help but be drawn to it. And then, I saw him. A figure emerged from the light, a presence unlike anything I had ever encountered. It was not merely physical, it was spiritual, deeply real in a way that transcended the human experience. I didn't need to see his face to know who he was. The very essence of his being radiated peace, truth, and love. He spoke, his voice not with sound but directly into the depths of my heart. "Do not fear, my child. You are not alone." I tried to speak, to ask questions, but I couldn't. It was as if the words I wanted to say were not needed. Instead, the figure simply looked at me with understanding, as if he knew everything that had brought me to this moment. All the doubts, all the fears, all the regrets, they were known to him already. And yet, there was no judgment. Only an invitation. "You have been given a glimpse of the eternal," he continued. "But there is much to learn, much to understand, before you return to the world you know." I was struck by his words. There was so much I didn't understand, but something deep inside me told me this moment was crucial. This wasn't just an accident, not just a momentary interruption of my life, it was the beginning of something far more significant. As I floated in the vast expanse of light and peace, the figure slowly began to reveal the path I would walk from here. "You will see things that are hidden from the eyes of most. Things that will come to pass in your world. And with these revelations, you will understand the importance of spiritual preparation." My heart stirred as he spoke, as though something deep within me resonated with his words. "What do you mean by spiritual preparation?" I asked, though I wasn't sure how I formed the thought. The figure smiled gently. "You are on the verge of a world that will be radically different from the one you know. Many will seek security and comfort through technology. They will be deceived by promises of safety, by the illusion of progress. But these things will come at a cost. A cost that can be paid only with your soul." The words hit me with an intensity one hadn't expected. It was as though I had heard a truth that my mind could barely grasp, but my spirit understood completely. There was something coming, a shift in the world, something I needed to prepare for. I felt an overwhelming sense of urgency. "What is coming?" I asked, my voice almost a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile reality of this encounter. The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, he allowed me to take in the vastness of the moment. I could feel the energy of the world around me, its beauty, its deep sorrow, its hope. And then, in the blink of an eye, the stillness was replaced by a vision. It was like watching a film, but it wasn't distant or detached. It was immediate, as if I was standing in the midst of it. The vision showed a future that was both familiar and alien. People walked around with blank expressions, their faces illuminated by the glow of screens, completely absorbed in the technology surrounding them. The world had become a place of convenience, a place where everything was at their fingertips, where all their needs were met by a complex web of systems they didn't understand, but relied on for survival. And in the midst of it all, there was a mark, a symbol that people would accept, believing it to be harmless, even beneficial. They would take it to gain access to food, shelter, security, and the comforts of life. It would be presented as a simple solution, a way to make life easier, safer. But as the vision continued, I saw its true cost. The mark was not merely a technological advancement. It was a chain. A chain that would bind people to systems they didn't understand, systems that would ultimately strip them of their connection to the divine. The more they relied on the mark, the further they would fall from the light. Their spiritual connection would be severed, replaced by a hollow dependence on technology. The choice would seem simple at first, a choice between hardship and convenience. But in the end, it would lead to a spiritual death. The weight of what I was seeing was almost unbearable. How could people not see it? How could they not recognize the danger in such an easy, alluring choice? The figure, still beside me, spoke once more. This is the world you will return to. It is a world that will soon be consumed by the illusion of progress. But you, my child, will be called to something greater. Your task is to prepare, to fortify your soul, to build strong communities of faith. You must not allow yourself to be deceived. But how? I asked. How can we stand against something so powerful, so persuasive? The figure's response was simple, yet profound. By returning to the basics of faith. By remembering that the true foundation is not found in technology or convenience, but in love, in community, and in a connection to the divine. The world may fall, but those who stand firm in their faith will not be shaken. I felt the weight of those words settle into my heart, a deep understanding blossoming within me. This was the beginning of my transformation. I had seen the path ahead, and it was not an easy one. But I also knew that, no matter what came, I would not be alone. The divine presence would guide me. And it would guide all who chose to follow the light. As I began to return to my body, the vision faded, but the understanding lingered. I had seen enough to know that the world I was returning to was on the verge of great change. But now, I was ready to face it, not in fear, but in faith. I took one last look at the figure, who was still there, watching over me. "Thank you," I whispered, though I knew words could never express the gratitude I felt. "You are not alone," the figure replied, and I felt those words wrap around me like a blanket, a promise that no matter how dark the world might become, I would always have the light. With that, I returned to my body. The pain of the crash came rushing back, but so did the clarity. I had been given a glimpse of the truth, and nothing would ever be the same again. The journey was just beginning. I opened my eyes, not in the way one expects after waking from sleep, but with an awareness that felt as if I had been born anew. The surroundings had shifted. I was no longer in the confines of my body or the wreckage of the crash. Instead, I was standing in a vast, radiant space, the light around me pure and infinite, stretching far beyond what the human eye could comprehend. The figure was beside me once again, a silent presence that exuded peace. Though I couldn't yet comprehend the full nature of his being, there was a warmth to him, an understanding that transcended the limitations of time and space. He didn't speak at first, he simply stood there, allowing the moment to stretch as though inviting me to take it all in. Then, as if sensing my unspoken question, the figure gestured toward the horizon, and with a subtle shift, I saw it, a vision, like a veil lifting from my eyes. It was the world I had known, but not the one I had left behind. This world was filled with technology, more advanced and intricate than I had ever imagined. People moved through their daily lives, faces illuminated by glowing screens, absorbed in a world they could hardly see beyond. I could feel the hum of machines, the weight of progress, pressing down upon them, shaping their every thought, every action. In this world, everything was interconnected, seamless, and perfectly convenient. Everyone had access to what they needed, when they needed it. Every person was linked to a system, smart homes, biometric identification, financial accounts that required only a glance, a touch, or a scan. The technology provided everything: comfort, security, entertainment, even sustenance. The system seemed perfect, and people embraced it with open arms, unaware of the subtle chains that were being fastened around their lives. And then, the vision shifted again. I saw the mark that had been alluded to before. It wasn't just a symbol, a logo, or a piece of technology. It was an all-encompassing system, a digital signature woven into the very fabric of daily life. It started small, almost innocuous. People began to use it for convenience. Just a chip to make transactions easier, they said. A way to connect all aspects of life seamlessly. But that was only the beginning. As I watched, I saw how the mark slowly began to infiltrate every aspect of society. It wasn't forced at first. In fact, it was almost presented as a blessing. People were told it would make their lives easier. No more lost keys. No more remembering passwords. No more delays. Everything was faster, smoother, and better. At first, there were those who hesitated. They questioned the need for such an invasive system. But the world pressed on. Those who hesitated were marginalized, made to feel out of step with the future, even backward. Gradually, the mark became the norm. The whispers of discomfort faded as more and more people accepted it. It wasn't an overt coercion, but a slow, subtle pressure. It was as though the system had its own gravitational pull, drawing people in without their fully understanding the consequences. And then, as the vision unfolded, the true cost of the mark became painfully clear. With each step of acceptance, each new convenience granted by the system, people grew increasingly disconnected. Their lives were no longer their own, they were governed by a network of machines, algorithms, and data. Their thoughts, actions, and desires were no longer independent. They were shaped, directed, and controlled by unseen hands. The mark itself was not inherently evil. At least, not at first. It wasn't some monstrous device, not a grotesque symbol of control. It was something far more insidious, a subtle poison that seeped into every part of a person's life, a quiet surrender of personal agency, and a turning away from the divine. As people took the mark, they believed they were merely embracing the future. But the true cost was their souls. I watched as families grew increasingly isolated, despite the ever-connected world. People's interactions, once filled with warmth and empathy, became cold and transactional. The love between them seemed to drain away, replaced by an artificial sense of satisfaction. The mark provided security, but at the expense of everything that made life meaningful. Faith, hope, and love, these things were no longer central to life. People, entranced by the promises of the mark, lost touch with the very essence of what it meant to be human. I turned to the figure, my heart heavy with what I had seen. Is this the future? Is this what will happen to us? I asked, the question slipping from my lips as if the weight of it were unbearable. The figure looked at me, and I could feel his deep compassion. It is the future of many, he said, his voice like a balm to my troubled spirit. This is not a future forced upon them. It is a choice, a gradual acceptance. Many will believe they have no other option. They will embrace it, thinking it is their salvation. But the cost is greater than they realize. The mark will rob them of their connection to the divine, to the light. And once they accept it, it will be very difficult to break free. The weight of those words settled in my chest. I could feel the truth of them deep in my soul. People would accept the mark thinking it was the answer to their problems. They would accept it, believing it was a step toward progress, toward a brighter future. But they wouldn't see the darkness creeping in, the slow erosion of their spiritual lives. But why is it so dangerous? I asked, though I feared I already knew the answer. The figure's gaze softened. The mark is not just a physical symbol, it is a spiritual one. By accepting it, people are making a choice to place their trust in something that is not of the divine. They are choosing convenience over faith, security over love, control over freedom. The mark will become the seal of a system that denies the true sovereignty of God in their lives. And with that choice, they will surrender something far more valuable than convenience. They will surrender their souls. The vision swirled, and I saw once again the faces of people who had taken the mark. Some of them seemed content, even happy in their complacency. But others were lost. Their eyes were vacant, their hearts empty. They had everything they could have wanted, and yet, they had nothing at all. They had traded their very essence for the convenience of a world that promised peace, but delivered only emptiness. The divine figure placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, and in that simple touch, I felt the depth of his love. "The road will not be easy," he said softly, "but you must remain vigilant. There are many who will be deceived by the promise of comfort. It is your task to help them see the truth, to show them the way back to the light." I nodded, my heart heavy but resolute. The path ahead would not be easy. But I knew now that there was something I had to do. Something far greater than myself. And I could no longer walk blindly through life. With that, the vision began to fade, and I was once again drawn back into the stillness, the presence of the divine figure by my side. There was much to learn still, but already I knew that the world would not be as it seemed. The journey ahead was one of awakening, of resistance, and of standing firm in the light. And I would have to prepare, not just myself, but all who would listen. The mark, the future, the choices of humanity, they were no longer distant concepts. They were here. And the time to act was now. The light around me flickered for a moment, and the peaceful presence of the figure beside me deepened in intensity. The visions that had once been clear, revealing the technological future and the acceptance of the mark, now grew more intricate, more detailed. I felt the weight of these visions in my chest, as though they were not only unfolding before my eyes but were also unfolding within my soul. The figure did not speak at once. Instead, he allowed the visions to flow in and out of my awareness, the narrative changing, like the pages of a book being turned slowly by an unseen hand. I saw the world once again, but now it had moved past the initial stage of the mark's acceptance. The transition had been gradual, almost imperceptible. The conveniences had grown so vast, so compelling, that the mark had become a natural part of life. People were no longer simply accepting it for security or ease, they now depended on it. The system had expanded. It wasn't just a way to track purchases or simplify everyday tasks, it was woven into the very fabric of their existence. It was in their homes, their schools, their workplaces, and even their places of worship. The mark was no longer just an option, it had become an expectation. I saw how the promises it offered were now harder to ignore. No more long waits in line. No more forgotten passwords or lost wallets. No more traffic jams or inconveniences of any kind. Life flowed effortlessly, a seamless harmony of technology designed to meet every need. The promises were subtle but powerful: security, efficiency, and a future free of struggle. It was a world where everything worked perfectly, where everything appeared to be in balance. The people had become convinced that this was the path to true peace, true freedom. What they didn't understand, what they couldn't yet see, was the subtle deception hidden beneath it all. The mark was not just a physical change, it was a spiritual one. It was a choice made in the heart, a surrender of control, not to their own will, but to the will of a system, a cold and calculating force that promised them everything and gave them nothing. The figure's voice broke through my thoughts, soft yet firm. "They will not see it for what it is at first," he said. "The mark will be presented as a solution, a gift, even. It will seem harmless, a small thing. But with each person who accepts it, the chain grows tighter. The deeper the connection, the harder it becomes to see what is lost." I nodded, understanding the gravity of his words, but the weight of it all was difficult to bear. I had seen the early stages, the benefits, the ease of the system. But the cost was still a mystery. Why was the mark so dangerous? Why would anyone reject such a beautiful, flawless world? The figure, sensing my confusion, allowed the vision to continue, and I felt myself being pulled further into the future, to a time when the world had fully embraced the mark. The promises had been fulfilled, and the world had achieved a level of comfort and peace never before seen. Yet, something was wrong. There was a coldness that settled over everything. People smiled, but it was an empty smile, a smile that didn't reach their eyes. There was no joy in their laughter, no warmth in their connections. The mark, I realized, had not only taken away their independence, it had also taken away their ability to truly connect with one another. Conversations were now mediated by the system, filtered through devices and algorithms. True friendship, love, and community were now rare, replaced by shallow exchanges that lacked any real depth. People went through their days, aware of the surface of things, but unaware of the hollowness beneath. They will not see what they lose, the figure said, as if reading my thoughts. The more they gain, the more they lose. In the pursuit of comfort, they will relinquish their hearts. And when that happens, their faith will begin to slip away. The vision shifted again, and I saw people, millions of them, walking through life with vacant expressions, eyes glued to their devices. They were more connected than ever, yet utterly isolated. Some of them were deeply involved in religious communities, others in their families. And yet, the faith that once connected them to the divine, the hope that once lifted their spirits, was now a mere shadow. It was as if their connection to the divine had been replaced by a constant stream of information, a never-ending buzz of notifications and data. I felt a pang in my heart, the realization dawning slowly. The mark had become a tool of disconnection, one so subtle that no one even realized the shift. People still believed they were free, that they were making their own choices, but the truth was far different. The system had woven itself so deeply into their lives that it was now impossible to discern the line between choice and coercion. But they don't see it, do they? I asked softly. They think they are still in control. They do, the figure replied, his voice heavy with sorrow. That is the most subtle part of the deception. They believe they are free because they are given the illusion of choice. But freedom in this system is an illusion. They are bound by it, and the longer they stay, the harder it will be to break free. I closed my eyes, the truth settling like a stone in my chest. It was a horrifying thought. The world had embraced this system, this mark, believing it was their salvation, believing it was their future. But in doing so, they had surrendered something far greater. They had surrendered their very ability to choose, their very connection to the divine. And those who resist, I asked, my voice trembling slightly, what happens to them? The figure's expression softened. Those who resist will be persecuted. They will be called backwards, foolish, even dangerous. But they will find strength in their faith, and they will become beacons of light in a world that is growing darker by the day. Their faith will be tested, yes, but they will endure. And those who remain faithful will find the path of true freedom, the freedom that cannot be given by any system, but only through the love and grace of the divine. The vision before me began to fade, the future slipping away as quickly as it had come. Yet, even as the light dimmed, I knew the truth in my heart. The mark was not just a physical thing, it was a choice, a test of faith. The world would be deceived, lulled by the promises of convenience and peace. But those who could see through the illusion, those who could hold fast to their faith, would stand firm. And that, I knew, was where the real battle lay, not in the mark itself, but in the hearts of the people. Their hearts were being tested, and those who stood firm would not only resist the mark, they would resist the darkness that came with it. As the vision finally faded, I was left standing in the stillness, a sense of peace flooding my being. The future was uncertain, and the choices ahead would be difficult. But I understood now, the deception was subtle, and the stakes were higher than I could have imagined. The world would test us, but we had to be ready to stand firm in our faith. The vision faded, but the weight of the revelations remained. I stood in a place between worlds, the divine figure beside me, his presence warm, yet serious. The peace that had enveloped me moments before was now mingled with an undeniable urgency. What had been shown to me was not just a warning, it was a call to action. The divine figure's gaze was gentle, yet there was a depth to his eyes that I had never seen before. I felt a stirring within me, a need to do something, anything, to help others understand the gravity of what was to come. The world was on the verge of accepting the mark, and with it, a darkness that would slowly spread through society. But there was still hope. There was still time. You must prepare, he said, his voice as steady as ever, yet tinged with a sense of compassion. You must prepare not just for the physical challenges ahead, but for the spiritual battles that will come with them. This is not just about surviving, it is about living with purpose, living with faith. I nodded, my heart heavy with the weight of his words, but also filled with a quiet determination. I had learned much, and yet it seemed I had only just begun to understand the depth of the task ahead. What could one person do in the face of such overwhelming forces? How could I prepare, let alone help others prepare, for something as monumental as this? The figure seemed to understand my thoughts, for he smiled kindly, as though he had seen this question in my heart before. It begins with your faith, he said. Everything begins there. You must strengthen your relationship with the divine, for that will be the foundation upon which all else is built. His word struck me deeply. Faith, true, unwavering faith, was the cornerstone of everything. Without it, I would have nothing to stand on when the storm came. And yet, faith alone wouldn't be enough. I had to grow, to develop not only spiritually but also in practical ways. I had to prepare my heart, yes, but also my hands, my mind, my community. I had to be ready in every sense of the word. The figure continued, guiding me through the next part of the vision. You must also build strong, supportive communities, ones that are bound by love, faith, and a commitment to each other's well-being. In the days to come, when the world grows darker and the pressures of the system mount, it will be these communities that will help keep your faith alive. You cannot walk this journey alone. I saw in that moment the power of human connection. The communities he spoke of weren't just places of gathering, they were sanctuaries, places where people would lift each other up, where they would encourage one another to stay strong, to resist the temptations that the mark would bring. They would be places of refuge, where the light of faith would burn bright, even when the darkness pressed in from all sides. The figure spoke again, this time with even more urgency. You must also prepare practically. While faith is your foundation, you must also be prepared to meet the challenges of a world that will grow more hostile to your beliefs. Learn skills that will help you survive, grow your own food, teach others how to be self-sufficient. Stockpile what is necessary, but never lose sight of the deeper purpose behind it. I felt the weight of those words, the realization that practical preparation was just as vital as spiritual preparedness. It wasn't just about survival, it was about resilience, about maintaining your integrity when the world around you was changing in ways you could not control. It was about living with intentionality, knowing that every choice you made had the potential to strengthen or weaken your resolve. Prepare your homes, your families, your hearts, the figure said. There will be times when it will be hard to tell who is truly for you and who is for the system. The mark will divide people. But your love for one another, your shared faith, will bind you together and give you the strength to endure. The vision shifted, and I saw people working together, gathering in small groups, sharing knowledge, building homes that were self-sustaining, and planting seeds for the future. I saw families learning how to grow food, how to preserve it, how to survive without relying on the systems that would soon control every aspect of their lives. There was an overwhelming sense of unity, of people coming together in the face of adversity. I saw myself among them, working, learning, teaching. The sense of peace that washed over me was not because everything was easy, but because I knew that I was not alone. There was strength in community, in shared purpose, and in the unwavering commitment to one another. The bonds that tied us together were unbreakable, even in the face of the most difficult challenges. The figure's voice was steady again, but this time, I could hear the love in it more clearly than ever. And now, you must share these lessons with others. Do not keep this knowledge to yourself. As you grow in faith, as you prepare spiritually and practically, so too must you help others do the same. The time is coming when the need for strong, united communities will be greater than ever. Help them to see the truth and to prepare for what lies ahead. I felt the weight of his words settle in my heart. It wasn't enough to just prepare myself. I had been shown something that I could not keep to myself. I had been given knowledge, yes, but also a responsibility to help others see, to help them prepare spiritually and practically for the trials ahead. You will not be able to save everyone, the figure said, but you can help many. And those you help will, in turn, help others. That is how the light spreads. And no matter how dark the world becomes, that light will never be extinguished. The vision began to fade, but the truth of his words remained with me, like a fire burning in my soul. The future was uncertain, and the challenges would be great. But I now understood the path ahead. It was a path of faith, of community, and of practical preparation. I had been shown the way forward. Not just for myself, but for all who would listen, for all who would choose to stand firm in their faith. And so, I left that place of visions, but I did not leave empty-handed. I carried with me a mission to prepare, to build, to share. The journey ahead would not be easy, but it was a journey I now faced with purpose, with hope, and with the strength that only faith could provide. The visions had come to an end, but the weight of the lessons lingered. I stood, once again, in the presence of the divine figure, his gaze tender yet firm. The urgency in his voice had softened, now replaced with a deep peace that wrapped around my soul like a blanket on a cold night. There was still much to learn, but the path forward seemed clearer than ever. You have seen much, he said, his voice resonating in the stillness of the moment. You have seen the darkness that is coming, the trials that will test the faith of many. But you must also know this, the darkness will never be all-consuming. There will always be hope. There will always be light. A wave of comfort washed over me. I had seen the world on the verge of chaos, caught in the grip of a false promise. The technological systems, the divisions that would grow between people, all of it seemed like an unstoppable force, a tidal wave about to drown everything in its path. But now, hearing those words, I felt a deep assurance that I had not felt before. The divine figure continued, his voice carrying a depth of love and wisdom that spoke directly to my heart. Even in the darkest of times, there is always the possibility of revival. There is always the opportunity for salvation. The choice, though, will always be yours. You can choose to remain faithful, to stand firm, no matter how the world around you changes. And those who choose that path, those who keep the faith, will be with me, no matter what comes. I felt the weight of those words settle deeply in my heart. The journey ahead would not be easy. The temptations to abandon faith, to seek security in worldly things, would be overwhelming. But the message was clear, there was always a choice. And that choice was in my hands. You are not alone, the figure said. Though the world grows darker, I am always with you. You are never abandoned. The light you carry within you will shine through the darkest night, and that light will draw others to it. Even if the whole world is consumed by the darkness, you will be a beacon of hope, a witness to the love that endures beyond all circumstances. I felt my heart stir with a quiet, unshakable strength. The weight of the future no longer seemed so crushing. There was hope, real, tangible hope. And with that hope came a new purpose, a new clarity. You have seen how the world will change, he said gently. But you must also remember this: I have not left you without guidance. You know what you must do. You know that faith, community, and preparation are the keys. It is time to return to your world now, to take what you have learned and to share it with those around you. The words settled in my spirit, like a seed planted deep within the soil. I had learned so much, had been given so much clarity, but now the true test began, returning to the world, to my life, and living out those lessons. The mission before me was clear: to prepare, to build community, to share hope, and to remind others that there was always a path to salvation, no matter how bleak things seemed. I took a deep breath, feeling the air rush into my lungs, more alive than I had ever felt. The vision began to fade, and I felt myself drawn back to the physical world, my body slowly reawakening as if I had been asleep for an eternity. With each passing second, the clarity of my purpose solidified. I would live differently now. I would walk the path of faith with a renewed sense of urgency and a deeper understanding of its importance. The future might be uncertain, but one thing was certain: I was no longer afraid. I had seen the possibility of revival, the promise of salvation, and I knew that I was meant to be a part of it. The figure's final words echoed in my mind as I returned fully to the world of the living: you are never alone, and you are never without hope. The light will always find its way through the darkness, as long as there are those who choose to carry it. As I opened my eyes to the world around me, I felt a profound peace. There was still much to do. The journey ahead would be long and difficult, but now I faced it with a renewed sense of purpose. I knew what I had to do, what I was called to do. I had been shown the way forward, and now it was up to me to walk it, to help others see the light, and to share the hope that had been so freely given to me. The world would grow darker. The challenges would intensify. But I would stand firm, rooted in faith, and ready to share the message of hope and salvation with anyone who would listen. No matter how dark the world became, I knew that the light I carried within me could never be extinguished. And so, I stepped forward, one step at a time, knowing that I was not alone, that the love and light of the divine would always guide me, no matter where the journey led. The mission was clear, and I was ready to begin.